The countdown to the 2024 college football season is officially on. And as we near the 2-month to kickoff marker, it's about time we start turning our attention to Georgia's 2024 opponents. So with that in mind, by popular demand, today we are kicking off a series that we do each and every summer. We've been doing this podcast for 10 years. So for the 10th summer, we've got, of course, the annual Scouting the Enemy series where we give you the deepest of deep dives into each of Georgia's Power 5 opponents. Up first is Georgia's Week 1 opponent, the Clemson Tigers. So get ready, y'all. We're going to have some fun with this one.
We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? I'm Tyler, and this is the Glory UGA podcast. And today we're doing something we don't normally do on YouTube. We don't normally put full episodes of the podcast on YouTube, but today we're making an exception because today's a big day. We are kicking off what is by far our most popular annual off-season series, the Summer Scouting the Enemy series, where we give you guys a deep dive preview into each one of Georgia's Power 5 programs. So for those of you who might be new to the podcast, finding us for the first time, we wanted to give you guys a full taste of what we offer on the Glory UGA podcast really all year long, but especially with these Summer Scouting the Enemy episodes. So we'll start at the top and we'll work our way down to the end of the schedule. Up first today is going to be Clemson. So if you like what you hear on today's episode, first off, make sure you check out the Glory UGA podcast wherever you get your podcast for more great Georgia sports content just like this, more deep dive content designed for you guys, the diehard fans. And let's kick this thing off, man. Let's not wait any longer. So yes, the Georgia Bulldogs are opening the 2024 season by renewing an old rivalry with the Clemson Tigers. And guys, this is a Clemson program that I do have a lot of respect for. I'm a Georgia guy, but I respect what Dabo Swinney has built at Clemson. Is it the same program that it was from 2015 to 2020? Well, we'll talk about that. But this is a program that I do have a lot of respect for, and it's a very proud Clemson program. And honestly, it's proud for good reason, certainly good reason over the past decade. After being, I would argue, if you look at the numbers historically, a fringe top 20 program in the history of college football, that's good, guys, relative to the rest of the country. But being roughly a fringe top 20 program for most of its history, Clemson, I mean, that program exploded into the upper echelons of the college football world with a 6-year run of college football playoff appearances. 6 consecutive CFP appearances from 2015 to 2020. That is incredibly impressive. That is quite the accomplishment. And guys, I mean, that's reality. They won 2 national championships in that time frame. That's reality. That's history. There's no taking that away from Clemson. So yes, for 6 years, 2015 to 2020, I think you could argue Clemson was probably a top 2 program right there with Alabama. I know Ohio State fans would want to throw themselves in there, but I think it was really Bama, Clemson for roughly 6 years. Yes, Georgia had that 2017 run, but I mean, that wasn't the same Georgia program that we are right now. That was certainly ahead of schedule, but really for a 6-year span, it was Bama, Clemson, right? A top 2 program. And it wasn't all that long ago. It really wasn't. But the reality is, as we sit here today, going into the 2024 season, which is really what matters for this episode. This episode is previewing the matchup between Georgia and Clemson in August of 2024. You know, what happened in 2016, I don't know how much relevance that holds to this matchup. So the reality is they are not that same program. In fact, they're not even particularly close. They are a far cry right now from the program they were from 2015 to 2020. Whether Clemson fans, if you found this episode or not, whether you want to admit it or not, Clemson fans, that's where this program is right now. Whether you want to admit it or not, there's a reason why this spread is nearly 2 touchdowns 2 months ahead of kickoff. There's a reason why. It's just not the same program. Now, I can sit here and just tell you that, but you guys know me. I like to back things up. I don't want to just throw things out there in the universe and not be able to back it up. So let me give you guys some numbers to back this up. So this program from 2015 to 2020, again, was a top 2 program in my estimation nationally. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a long time, you know that I'm a big advocate of looking at your total yardage margin. It's not the be-all, end-all. It doesn't tell you everything. But if you want a statistic that gives you a general, big-picture look at how good your team was, I think total yardage margin is a really good one. And if you're not familiar with that, if you're kind of new to the podcast, what I mean by total yardage margin, it's a simple stat. All you do is you take the amount of yards a team gained and you subtract from that the amount of yards they surrendered to their opponents, right? So you're either going to have a positive total yardage margin, which means you outgained your opponents by a certain amount, or if you have a negative total yardage margin, that means you were outgained by your opponents, which is not good. You do not, if you got outgained by your opponents, if you had a negative total yardage margin, you probably are barely making a bowl if you even got there, probably need some luck to get to a bowl. So that's what total yardage margin is. So from 2015 to 2020, that 6-year run of consecutive college football playoff berths, Clemson was out of this world with their yardage margin. I mean, crazy stuff, plus 28.96 on average. So what that means is on average, they were outgaining their opponents by, we'll say 2,900 yards on the year. That's big time stuff. That is a national championship statistical profile, right? Well, where is Clemson right now? Where have they been the last 3 years, from 2021 to 2023? Yeah, not even close. It's a positive total yardage margin, but guys, they're only plus 1,084. Now, relative to the rest of the country, that's good. And guys, Clemson is still a really good program. It's still a really good program relative to the rest of the country. But plus 1,084, you get what I'm saying here? That's a far cry from where they were, roughly plus 2,900 from 2015 to 2020. Not a math guy. You guys know this, but I triple checked myself on this. You can quadruple check me if you want. That is a 1,812 yard difference from where they were from 2015 to 2020, and now from 2021 to 2023, these 3 most recent seasons coming in to this 2024 year. That's a 170% decline in their total yardage margin, guys. That's what I'm talking about. Proud program for good reason. Still a good program, but not the same program they were when they were an annual, legitimate contender for a national title. And last year, actually, their yardage margin last year was better than it was in 21 and 22. It was plus 1,493. So roughly, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say plus 1,500. And you might say, well, that sounds really good. It is good. Plus 1,500, on average, that's the profile of a team that's 8, 9, 10 wins, depending if bounces go in favor of you or if they go against you. If you have a total yardage margin of 1,500 and bounces go in your favor, you could win 10 games. Sure, depending on what conference you're in, maybe you win the conference. Balls bounced against you, you might be 8 wins, right? And that's kind of where Clemson was last year, guys. Clemson was actually not a bad team last year. They were good. 8 wins in the regular season, you would say, nah, man, they weren't good at all. They were actually pretty good. The issue for Clemson was they just had some catastrophic turnovers, some catastrophic mistakes that cost them the game. I mean, the one that stands out to my mind more than any of them, I mean, Duke, there was a bunch in the Duke game. They were horrific all year long offensively in the red zone. We're not just like not scoring touchdowns, just turning the ball over in the red zone, just crazy stuff costing them games. But the one that stands out the most to me is the Florida State game, where he gets blindsided by Deloach. Clemson's controlling that game. Fumble, recovery, return for a touchdown, changes the landscape of the entire game. Those things went against Clemson last year. They easily could have won 10, maybe 11 games if balls had bounced their way. They just didn't bounce their way last year. So a good team, but guys, it's not a national title caliber team. That program from 2021, 2, and 3 has not been a national caliber team. I would argue, yes, they were a top 2 team from 2015 to 2020. I don't think Clemson's a tier 1 program right now. The last 3 years, they haven't been. Even if you're a Clemson fan, you have to admit that. I would say tier 1 programs right now, Georgia, Michigan, Alabama's still there right now. They're teetering, but they're there. They're there. They won the SEC last year, beat us. It is what it is. Ohio State's been there, can't beat Michigan, but they're there. Texas, I think, now is in that conversation. I think that's your tier 1. Maybe Florida State's inching. Florida State's done it for 1 year. I don't know if they're quite there yet. So might have them like that tier 2 knocking on the door. But I think Clemson's probably in that second tier. They're not in that top tier right now. So when I say they're not a national title contender anymore, let me give you some more numbers to back this up. Again, I like to back my numbers up. I don't want to just throw things out there just because I think something. I want to tell you why I think those things. So statistically, go back to total yardage margin. Georgia last year, we didn't win the national championship. I think we can all agree Georgia was at the very least a national title contender last year. Yes, we screwed up and lost the SEC title game. On us, our fault, but still a national title contender. I think you still argue maybe the best team in the country last year, but didn't win it. But still, Georgia was plus 2904 in its total yardage margin. Georgia in 2022, when we did win the national title, was plus 3066 in our total yards margin, outgained our opponents by over 3,000 yards in 2022. Michigan last year, national champion, plus 2036. Texas was the college football playoff team, plus 1971, so virtually plus 2,000. Clemson in 2018, when they were a national title team, had just an unbelievable, like off the charts, whopping plus 3620 total yardage margin. Those are teams with statistical profiles of national title contenders. That's generally where you need to be if you want to win a national title, if you're like a true contender for a national title. And there are some exceptions here, like TCU in 2022. And Washington last year, actually, their yardage margin was like 700. It wasn't great, but hey, Dan Lanning went crazy in that regular season matchup and basically blew the game with a bunch of just way too aggressive calls. They beat him in the Pac-12 championship game. Pac-12 wasn't super strong last year. It was competitive, but it wasn't super strong. And they found their way into the college football playoff and won a game when they got there and then find themselves in the national title game. But like TCU in 2022, when you find yourself in the national title game against a team that's a legit national title contender with a legit total yardage margin, you got no chance. You just got no chance, right? So those are profiles of teams with legitimate chances, aspirations to win a national title. Clemson hasn't been there, guys. They have not been there last 3 years, okay? So to me, that's clear. Like, it's not even a question. This Clemson program is just not where they were when they were legitimately contending for national titles. I think the bigger question is, and the far more relevant question heading into 2024, this matchup with Georgia week 1 in Mercedes-Benz Stadium is, what happened? What is the difference between Clemson from 2021 and 2023 and Clemson from 2015 and 2020 when they were one of the top 2 programs in all of college football? And the answer there is also pretty clear to me. The Clemson offense has quite simply fallen off of a freaking cliff. It's just not even remotely comparable to what it was from 2015 to 2016 or to 2020. So let's start there. With this breakdown, let's start with the Clemson offense. We'll eventually get our way to the Clemson defense, but I want to start with the offense because, again, I think this is the primary culprit behind why Clemson is no longer a legitimate national title contender, at least right now. Now, can they develop back into that in the future? Maybe, possibly, but we've got to start with the offense here. So, again, I got some numbers for you here. From 2015 to 2020, the Clemson offense averaged 501 yards per game, 6.62 yards per play, and 41 points per game. Those are big-time numbers. Those are national and championship numbers, especially when you pair that with an elite defense, which Clemson has always had. We'll get to that in a little bit here. But from 2021 to 2023, man, talk about falling off a cliff. Let me give you the numbers here. 390 yards per game, 5.3 yards per play, 29 points per game. So you go from 501 yards per game to 390. You go from 6.62 yards per play to 5.3. That's a dramatic drop, guys. 41 points a game to 29 points per game from 2021 to 2023. That's the difference, guys. The Clemson offense has fallen off the face of the earth. That's what happened here. So we've established that. We've established now with those numbers. And I could give you all the numbers. I have all these numbers I put together, guys. I don't want to bore you with numbers after numbers on the YouTube version of this. I might actually put a graphic up to show you year by year how they fall. Now, I will say, I know Clemson fans, what they come back with, they'll say, well, dude, 2017, like we weren't that good then, and we were still offensively, we still were in the college football playoff. Yes, you're right. Kelly Bryant, that was a 2017 year, and Clemson's offense did not put up the same kind of numbers they did when they had Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. They averaged 429 yards a game, 5.74 yards per play, and 33 points per game. And I would also say, what happened once that Clemson team got in the college football playoff? They play Alabama and never had a chance to win that game, right? So kind of case in point there. So yes, we've established Clemson offense over the last 3 years has fallen off the face of the earth. I think even the most staunch Clemson fan has to admit that. I mean, it's hard to deny that, guys. It's the numbers. If you're a Clemson fan, you've watched it, man. I mean, I watch Clemson. I don't watch every single game. I've watched probably 4 or 5 games a year. And going into this year, since Georgia plays them, I've watched every single game they played last year with a fine-tooth comb a couple times, actually, in preparation for this episode. But you've watched them far more than I have, and you're far more invested in Clemson. So you know how bad this Clemson offense has been. I mean, it's got to be frustrating when you had that offense just humming on all cylinders for 6 years, and now you're like, oh my God, what has happened? So that leads us to the next logical question. Why? Why has the Clemson offense fallen off the face of the earth? So to understand why, to attack this, I think you really have to understand the formula that led Clemson to this incredible run from 2015 to 2020 of 6 consecutive appearances in the College Football Playoff, 2 national titles in that span. So this is certainly an oversimplification. I understand that. But I think in general, there's 3 factors behind why Clemson was so successful in that 6-year span. Now, Clemson fans are going to kill me for this, but it is what it is, man. The ACC schedule, kind of a cakewalk, right? The ACC is just not what the SEC is. So Clemson's path to the College Football Playoff was simply easier on an annual basis than teams in the SEC, than Georgia or Alabama even, whoever it might have been, right? It was just this easier path. I mean, look at Washington last year. Yes, Oregon was in their conference, but outside of that, I mean, Washington's path to the College Football Playoff was easier. And when you get there, anybody, if you have enough good players, you can in a one-off setting beat anybody. It can happen, right? It's just about getting there. TCU, another example. 2022, a much easier path to college football playoff than maybe going through the SEC, maybe going through the Big Ten East, well, at least when it was actually alive. But I think that's certainly got to be a part of this. The ACC schedule just simply allowed Clemson a very easy path to get into the college football playoff. Now, once it got there, you got to beat some big boys. And to their credit, they did. Not always, but they did. So that's the first part. But the other part be really good defense. They've always, even now, as we'll get to in a little bit here, they had really, really good defense. I would argue elite defense, okay? So easy schedule, a very favorable schedule to give them an opportunity to get into the college football playoff. And then you have elite defense. And then, to me, this is the biggest difference here. Generational quarterback play, okay? Generational quarterback play. You have Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson first, then Trevor Lawrence. They hit on not just 2 good quarterbacks, they got 2, I would argue, I think that term's thrown around way too loosely. But I mean, for Clemson, I do think that Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence are generational guys, as elite as you're going to find. And they hit on 2 of them in a row, okay? That was the key to the run. Because here's the thing, guys. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about this Clemson program over the last decade or so under Dabo Swinney is that they are some recruiting juggernaut, like a recruiting superpower. No, they are not. Now, that's not to say Clemson doesn't recruit well. They do. They do recruit well. I'm not saying they're garbage when it comes to recruiting. They win a fair number of recruiting battles. They'll get some 5-star guys here and there. So, yeah, they do recruit well relative to the rest of the country. But this is not a consistent top 5 recruiting program. And I think if you ask the average random college football fan out there, like, hey, on average, where does Clemson rank in the recruiting rankings? They'll probably say somewhere at top 5-ish, right? No, like that's just not reality. Now, they've had a top 5 class here and there, but on average, that's not what they're doing. Okay, so I got some more numbers to back this up. Over the last 10 seasons, Clemson has finished on average at 9.3 in the 247 composite team rankings. 9.3. So a fringe top 10 recruiting team. That's what they are. They are a top 10 recruiting program, all right? Over the last 10 years, they have 4 classes inside the top 10, 2 classes inside the top 5, and 1 class inside the top 3, which was 2020 when they had the number 3 class in the country, according to the 247 composite. So that's really good relative to the rest of the country. But is that on par with the teams that are contending for national titles, the other teams that are contending for national titles on a pretty annual basis? Let's take Georgia, for instance, since Georgia and Clemson are playing each other to open this season. Georgia, over that same time span, the last 10 years, roughly Kirby Smart's tenure a year or so before he got here, but the last 10 seasons, Georgia has finished on average with a recruiting class ranked 2.9. So on average, a top 3 recruiting class over the last 10 years. Over the last 10 seasons, Georgia has finished with 10 top 10 recruiting classes. So every single recruiting class that Georgia has had over the last 10 seasons has been top 10. There's not been one recruiting class that Georgia's had over the last 10 years that was lower than number 6. Georgia has had 8 of the last 10 recruiting classes inside the top 5. 7 of the last 10 have been inside the top 3. 5 of the last 10, 50% of Georgia's last 10 recruiting classes have been top 2 classes, and Georgia's had 3 number 1 classes over that 10-year span. So you know what I'm saying here? Clemson has a really good roster relative to most teams in the country. They don't have the type of roster that Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State, and I would argue now Texas have. They don't have that kind of roster. A top 10 roster, they don't have a top 3 roster. They don't, okay? And that's fine. You can still win big with a top 10 roster. But to do that, you have to have elite play at the most important positions. Like, quarterback. And that is what Clemson had from 2015 to 2020, right? And I think the Georgia and Clemson, that comparison is really fascinating because Georgia, over the last 10 years, they have recruited better than Clemson over the last 10 years at large. So Georgia, over a 10-year span, has consistently had, according to the recruiting rankings, I know recruiting rankings aren't everything because there's some hits, there's some misses, but, it gives you a pretty good general picture, a good big picture look at things. But Georgia, over the last 10 years, has had the more talented roster, but didn't have that elite quarterback play. Clemson, on the other hand, has had a talented roster, but didn't have Georgia's level roster, but they had elite, generational quarterback play. So that shows you, that's case in point of just how important quarterback play is in winning national titles. It is imperative. So, yes, Clemson has a good roster. I'm not trying to suggest they don't. Clemson has a very, very good roster. But I would argue it's not an elite roster, at least not relative to the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Texases of the world, the teams that have been in more recent years, we're not talking about 2015, 2020, we're talking about recent years, have been contending for national titles. Because, if you think about it, guys, that's fine. Clemson had a really good roster, and they still do have a really good roster. And that was fine. You could still win national titles when you have that elite quarterback play, because you can mask the deficiencies. You can cover up the holes when you have generational quarterback play like that, when you have Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. And again, I'll go back to Kelly Bryant in 2017. Just look at that gap year. That 1 year from 2015 and 2020 when they did not have Deshaun Watson or Trevor Lawrence. You have Kelly Bryant. Yeah, you make it to the college football playoff because the ACC kind of just sucks. Let's just be real. An easy path to get there. But once you got there with Kelly Bryant, without that generational quarterback play, your roster wasn't good enough to beat the other elite teams. The teams that actually had elite rosters 1 through 85 didn't have the holes that you had in your roster. And that's the situation. So the offensive numbers, go back to 2017, went dramatically down in 2017, but they're right back up in 2018. So they go from, 2017, 429 yards a game, 5.74 yards per play, 33 points per game. That was with Kelly Bryant. You get Trevor Lawrence in there, 2018. What did he got? 527 yards per game, 7.35 yards per play, 44 points per game. What changed? One thing, quarterback play. That's what changed there. So what I'm saying here is that Clemson rode 2 generational quarterbacks to 2 national titles, that 6-year run of college football playoff appearances, but it was never really sustainable. All right? That's the thing. It was never really sustainable. They were always kind of playing with fire because the reality is you were never going to continue to hit on generational quarterback after generational quarterback after generational quarterback year after year after year. Somewhere along the way, eventually, you were going to miss. All right? And when you miss, that's a problem because the quarterback play was, in my opinion, the foundation of that run. And when you miss on quarterback and you don't have a generational guy, all of a sudden now all those holes, all those deficiencies you were able to mask and cover up, well, now they're glaring. Now they're exposed because there's no one to compensate for those deficiencies. And as soon as they missed on a guy, what happened? Their offense, their program came plummeting back down to reality. Because, again, outside of the quarterback play, Clemson had a really good roster. But did Clemson really have up and down the roster? They had other good players. You got some elite defensive linemen. Absolutely. You've had you had Isaiah Simmons. You had some really good players on defense. You've had some really good receivers over the years. Some really good players in spots. But 1 through 85, were you elite every position? Because you look at other teams like Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, or Texas, Ohio State. I mean, you're hard pressed to find a position where they're not elite. It's tough. With Clemson, you can look at the roster right now and say, okay, I see a hole here, I see a hole there, I see a hole there. There are holes. So it's hard to compensate for that. It's hard to cover those things up when you don't have that elite quarterback play. So in 2021, what happens? We all remember this because Georgia played Clemson open the 2021 season, right? Remember that barn burner of a game. Was it 10-3? Final score, no offensive touchdowns in that game? Yeah, that was a fun one. It was a fun one, but an ugly one at the same time. But 2021 arrives, and DJ Uiagalelei was an unmitigated disaster. And Clemson fans weren't prepared for it because they thought he was the guy. I mean, I get it. 6 years of just insane quarterback play, and you're conditioned to think, well, we're just always going to have elite quarterback play. This guy's a 5-star guy. He's the next one in line. We're just never going to miss on a guy. But, I mean, again, it's like that was fantasy land. Eventually, you're going to miss. And it just came earlier. I think Clemson fans probably thought it would because they thought DJU was going to be the guy, especially after that game. Was it 2020 at Notre Dame? Played really well in that game. And even I thought, I was like, this guy actually might be pretty decent. But he wasn't. He wasn't. I mean, we know what DJU is. He's fine, but he's not that kind of guy. So in 2021, when DJU takes over for Trevor Lawrence, what happens to the Clemson offense? It absolutely craters. Yes, they was slightly better in 2022. And he was a little bit better in 2022. Still not great, but better. And they were able to reclaim the ACC throne. But the cracks were still there, guys. The cracks in this Clemson roster and their foundation were still there. And then, I mean, that 2022 season, yeah, they won the ACC, but they got throttled by Notre Dame, and then shockingly somehow lost to a bad South Carolina team at home to end the season, which, I mean, that took them out of the college football playoff. If they win that game, they made the college football playoff. I don't think they would have won a game. Probably would have played Georgia and would have gotten wiped out, but they would have made it, right? But it's all good, right? Clemson fans say it's all good. DJU, he's gone, goes off to Oregon State, now at Florida State. We've got our guy, all right? Yeah, we missed on DJU, but we're okay. We're back on track. We've got Cade Klubnik. He's in. He's the savior in 2023. And on top of that, you bring in Garrett Riley, Lincoln Riley's brother, offensive mastermind from TCU, who spearheaded TCU's run to the national championship game where they got summarily just destroyed by Georgia. But you bring in Garrett Riley. You now got Cade Klubnik. He's the savior. National championship back on, baby. We're starting a new run. No. Not even close. So let's talk about the personnel here. Let's get to Cade Klubnik. Let's get this 2024 team. I mean, can we say right now, at least based off what we know about Cade Klubnik, okay, this is a new year. Maybe he takes a massive leap. Maybe. But it's going to take a massive leap, guys, because the Cade Klubnik that we have seen so far, now it's only one full season as a starter. There is that, okay? But based off what we've seen right now, we have nothing to tell us that Cade Klubnik is the kind of guy at quarterback that can compensate for some of the deficiencies they still have on this roster. We've seen nothing to suggest to us that he is a Trevor Lawrence or a Deshaun Watson type guy. In fact, not even close. I would argue, Clemson fans will know what I'm talking about here. I mean, if you're being real, guys, based off what we've seen from Cade Klubnik so far, young-ish guy, but based on what we've seen from him so far, he's far closer to Cole Stout than he is to Trevor Lawrence, for being real. That's what he's been so far. I mean, look at the numbers here, guys. 64% completion percentage last year, 2,800 yards passing, 6.3 yards per attempt, which is just abysmal. 6.3 yards per attempt. Like, they're not even trying to throw the ball down the field with this guy. And if you look at his game log, the back half of the season, especially that South Carolina game, I mean, they realized, like, we're just not even trying to throw the football. I mean, they had some issues at receiver. We'll get that in a minute here. Like, they had some injuries there. That's part of it. But they didn't trust Cade Klubnik down the stretch. And I think if you watched them, you kind of understand why. 6.3 yards per attempt. They're not even trying to throw the ball down the field. 19 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 10 fumbles, man. This guy he lost 5 of them. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to call him a turnover machine, but like certainly loose with the football. I think it's fair to say 9 interceptions, 10 fumbles last year. He is a good athlete, and they'll do some QB run stuff with him. He has some escapability. He can create outside the pocket, which I think is really what he does best, to be honest with you. Like, he almost seems more comfortable out there than he does in the pocket. And he has the measurables. I get why Clemson fans were excited about him. I get why he was a highly ranked guy coming out of high school, because on paper, he looks the part. Like, on paper, he should be really, really good. But out there on the field, he just hasn't been, man. He just hasn't been, because I think a big part of it is he gets sped up. He gets really sped up. He kind of panics out there if you watch him closely. He's not a great processor. Maybe he can improve on that a little bit. I mean, you don't go from being just a very slow, questionable, at times bad processor to being an elite processor in 1 year. That doesn't really happen. Can things slow down to a degree? Yeah, to a degree, but you still kind of are who you are to some degree when it comes to processing. He's also a very questionable decision maker. Made some just really, really poor decisions with the football. Accuracy is up and down. I would say he's fairly erratic with his accuracy. So Klubnik is a guy that, I'm not telling you he's garbage. There are a lot of teams out there in the country that would love to have a guy like Cade Klubnik be their quarterback. But have we seen anything to this point to suggest to us that this guy is an elite quarterback? I have not. And again, I've gone back and I've watched every single Clemson game with a fine-tooth comb preparing for this week 1 match, which I can talk about it here on this episode in all off-season long. I haven't seen anything, guys, and I think if Clemson fans are being honest with themselves, they would have to say the same thing. Now, it's not to say he can't improve this year. I do expect him going to year 2 as a starter, year 2 with the same offensive coordinator. I expect him to be better, but we can't expect him to go from what he was last year to even fringe Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson. That's unreasonable to expect that. Now, in fairness to Cade Klubnik, the wide receiver situation for Clemson last year was a disaster. All right, it was really injury riddled. It was an injury riddled receiving core. To me, their best player at receiver, the guy that, as a Georgia fan, the guy that I don't know if concern's the right word, the guy that I am most aware of watching their tape is Tyler Brown. I like Tyler Brown. I think he's a good player. He's got a little bit of versatility. He can play in the slot, can play out. I think he's more of a slot guy, personally. He can also play outside and was kind of forced into that role at times due to some of the injuries they had. But last year, he had 52 receptions for 531 yards as a freshman. A smaller guy, but elusive, quick, really good in and out of his breaks, a strong route runner, can create in space. He's a good dynamic player for them. Adam Randall is a guy they expect a lot of this year. Hasn't been elite yet. Was a pretty high-profile recruit. They've been waiting for this guy to come on. He's shown flashes at times, but he hasn't been able to consistently put together. Clemson fans are very hopeful that this year it will click for him. We'll see. 22 catches for 250 yards last year. He's a bigger guy than Tyler Brown. And this next guy, Antonio Williams, who was really good. He was the guy coming into 2023 for Clemson. I thought he was going to be their best receiver, and he probably would have been if it wasn't for injuries. In 2022, he had 56 receptions for 604 yards. I believe he was a redshirt freshman that year, or either a true freshman or a redshirt freshman. Last year, injuries got in the way, 22 receptions for 224 yards, but he'll be back, and he's healthy this year. He's a good receiver. I think him and Tyler Brown are very similar in their physical profiles and what they bring to the table. Adam Randall is more of a big body type receiver for them. Tony Stellato is a guy that had to play a lot of snaps for them late last year because, again, they just didn't have a lot of bodies. But Stellato is just a guy. He's not someone that's going to scare you. He can make a play here or there, but he's not going to consistently beat you in man coverage. He's not that kind of guy, good solid possession guy, but he's not a dynamic threat at receiver. But what I would argue right now is Clemson has some good options at receiver if everyone is healthy, which they weren't last year, to be fair. But I would also say that they don't have anyone in that receiver room right now that is a bona fide, proven difference maker. Maybe Tyler Brown can be that guy. I'm open to that. I do think he's a good football player, and he can be dangerous with the ball in his hands. And Tony Williams did some good things in 2022. Again, very similar to Tyler Brown. Adam Randall, the potential's there, but we haven't really seen it. I need to see it to believe that. So, who's the proven difference maker? Maybe one of those guys. Maybe two of the guys emerge this year and become that, but they haven't been that to this point in their careers. Now, one guy I love on their offense, in terms of a pass catcher, is not a receiver at all. It's a tight end. Jake Brenningstool. I think that guy's elite. I think Jake Brenningstool is as good of a tight end as there is in the country, honestly. I really, really do. I love this guy. He's not Brock Bowers, but he's a really talented pass catcher. I think he's a surefire NFL guy. He's tall, athletic, a really dependable option. They'll use him. They'll feed him the ball. They do a lot with him in the short to intermediate range. Not really trying to create explosive plays on the field with him. From time to time, they will. But when he gets the ball in his hands, if he has any space, he's a tight end that can make things happen. He's a really, really, really good athlete. He's the guy I think is the most dynamic pass catcher. Arguably, maybe they were Tyler Brown. But last year, Brenningstool had 50 catches for 498 yards, or essentially 500 yards. I fully expect them to feed that dude the ball in this game. I fully expect them to. He seemed to be kind of the security blanket for Cade Klubnik last year with Georgia's defense, and how we're going to try to come after Cade Klubnik would be my expectation of this game. I expect them to try to game plan ways to get the ball into Jake Briningstool's hands. Again, I think he's a bona fide NFL dude. Like, I think he's a really, really, really good tight end. I truly do mean that. So I expect him to be a big part of the game plan, and I think for good reason. He's probably their best pass catcher in my estimation right now. But the passing game last year, guys, in general, was just anemic, man. I mean, it was, let's be real, it was pathetic. I mean, that's the word that comes to mind. It was pathetic. No explosiveness whatsoever. So I already told you the number last year. So 6.3 yards per attempt for Cade Klubnik. That's crazy, guys. They were 118th nationally in passing plays of 30 or more yards. I mean, guys, there's like 130 so teams in FBS football. 118th nationally. Clemson. You don't win national titles like that, guys. You have to be able to create explosive plays. And for 3 years now, Clemson has not been able to create any explosive plays. They brought in Garrett Riley to try to fix that. Year one, it wasn't fixed. So was it a Garrett Riley problem? Was it just like, hey, it's year one, we've got to work out the kinks? Or was it deeper than that? Is it more of a personnel problem? I think there's certainly something to do with the fact that it was year one of Garrett Riley, a little bit of a late hire there, and it took some time for them to learn that system. Sure. But to me, it's far more personnel-based. They don't have the explosive playmakers. You don't have a quarterback that right now you trust to throw the ball down the field. Yes, you were banged up at receiver last year. That hurt, but you weren't explosive in 22 or 21 either, right? So I think it's more of a personnel thing. I think you have good solid receivers, but who's the guy that's beating people down the field? Are you generating explosive plays in the passing game? You're not. You're simply not. If you aren't doing that, you can't win national titles. You just can't. You're not going to be able to do that. So, I mean, if you look at Clemson last year, go back and watch some of the tape, guys. Everything was behind the line of scrimmage, or certainly either behind or like right in front of the line of scrimmage. They're throwing everything short, screen game. They're trying to get the ball into guys' hands and just see if they can go to work in space, and teams figure that out. I think it's another indictment of Cade Klubnik, the fact that there's only 6.3 yards per attempt. Because, look, 64% completion percentage and 6.3 yards per attempt, there's something that's incongruent, all right? That doesn't mesh. Typically, it just makes sense, right? If your yards per attempt average is that low, 6.3, what that says is, again, you're throwing a lot of balls at or behind the line of scrimmage, right? So those are very high percentage throws. So typically speaking, if your yards per attempt number is 6.3, your completion percentage better be like in the mid-70s, because you are getting high percentage throws. You're not trying to throw the ball down the field. If your yards per attempt is upwards near like 9, 10, well, I get it if your completion percentage is only 64%, because you're throwing the ball down the field more, and those are lower percentage throws. So typically, what you see, and there's exceptions, but what you tend to see is higher yards per attempt, lower completion percentage. Lower yards per attempt, higher completion percentage. Klubnik was low yards per attempt and low completion percentage. That's very much an indictment of this guy. I mean, Carson Beck was the exact opposite. Set a Georgia record for completion percentage by a quarterback in a single season and averaged almost 10 yards per attempt. That's an elite quarterback. Cade Klubnik's not that. Now, maybe he'll grow into it. Maybe. All I can go off of is what we've seen at this point. And what we've seen at this point is a guy that I think is a very, very average quarterback, and honestly, at times, puts his team in some very, very tough situations. So, look, when you throw the ball short like that, now maybe this year they're going to try to fix some things in year 2 of Garrett Riley, maybe. But if you're going to do that again this year, you just aren't going to beat Georgia. You're not going to beat Georgia throwing the ball at and behind the line of scrimmage, down. You're not going to do it. You're just not going to be able to beat Georgia. Think about the teams, guys, over the last 3 or so years. Think about the teams that have given Georgia issues offensively. The offenses that have given the Georgia defense trouble, right? Well, it's teams that have explosive passing attacks that are run by elite quarterbacks paired with elite wide receivers. Clemson's like 0 for 3 in that, guys. They're not explosive. They don't have an elite quarterback. They don't have elite receivers. So is this really a Clemson offense that really has any chance to challenge Georgia? Like, we'll get to the running game here in a minute, but if you're going to try to lean on the ground game, and you're going to try to beat Georgia by running the ball down their throat, good luck, man. Like, I know this Georgia rush defense isn't what it was in 21 and 22. It's still pretty damn good, man. And you're not going to beat Georgia just trying to pound the ball at them down in and down out. You're not going to do it, man. You're just simply not. So, I don't know, man. And I guess that brings it to the next point here. If they can't beat us with the pass, what about this run game? So, That's the thing, man. Like with this lack of downfield passing game, what teams have done with Clemson is that they've been more aggressive defending the run. They've been able to do that because Clemson doesn't have the receivers, the passing game at large, that's threatening teams. So why would you bother playing for it? Be aggressive, defend the run, because that's really what Clemson's trying to do. And that has dampened the effectiveness of the Clemson run game. And here's the stat for you guys. The Clemson offense has not averaged more than 4.56 yards per rush since 2019. 4.5 yards per rush, guys, that's kind of average. They haven't averaged more than that since 2019. In fact, they have not finished better than 58th in yards per rush in that time span. It's not good. It's not great. That's not even though they want to run the football, that's not the kind of rushing attack that's going to beat Georgia, to be that Georgia defense. So I think the biggest culprit behind that is, yes, the lack of a downfield passing game. Without that downfield passing game to keep defenses honest, they've been able to sneak up against the run, get guys in the box, play aggressive against the run, and it's really hampered their ability to be effective enough running the football to beat the elite teams on their schedule. So I think that's the biggest culprit. But the other part of this is their offensive line has also been an issue, man. So I go back to that opening game of 2021, Georgia Clemson, right, coming off of the COVID season. And you remember that game? Yes, it was just an ugly game on both sides offensively. But I remember that being the first time the Clemson offensive line was like truly exposed. Yes, that Georgia defense was elite, but that Clemson offensive line, it never really got better for them. And it really hasn't gotten much better since that point. Marginally, yes, but it's still an offensive line that struggles against elite front six units, elite defensive lines. They struggle against those kind of teams. Now, they do return four-ish starters. They had some injuries on the offensive line last year, so I'm going to say four-ish starters. Walter Parks, the guy that missed all but 2 games. He started, I think, the first 2 games of the year, then missed the rest of the year. He's back this year, so he's the ish. We'll call him the 4th-ish starter returning. But, I mean, the offensive line is kind of just okay. I think Walker Parks, Clemson's high on him. The small bit I've seen of him, I think he can be a good player for them at guard. Tristan Lee is a really highly recruited tackle. He's going to play left tackle for them. He was a 5-star guy. I would argue he has not exactly played like that. Maybe this year he takes his game up a notch, but he hasn't played like a 5-star. Hasn't been a disaster, but also hasn't been a dominant player at that left tackle spot. Blake Miller at right tackle, who played most of the year from the right tackle last year and is projected to start there at right tackle again this year. He was just straight bad. He got pushed around, got very little movement at the point of attack, very poor technique, man, off balance consistently. Like, it was a rough year for him. Could he be better this year? Yeah, probably a little bit better, but how much better are we talking about here? So I got some questions there. Again, Walter Parks, Marcus Tate at guards. I think they're solid in the interior, especially at guard. Center's interesting. You lose Will Putnam, who was a kind of a stalwart in that Clemson offensive line. He probably was their best offensive lineman for the past couple years. Not saying much, but probably was their best offensive lineman. This year, they got a guy named Ryan Lippincombe, who's going to play center for them. He's been a career backup, so there's not much to say. They haven't seen him play all that much. We'll see what happens there. Again, all I can tell you, guy hasn't played much. He's been a career backup. We'll see. Now, he was behind a really good player, but we'll see what he brings to the table there. So offensive line, could it be moderately better this year? Sure. But it's still not going to be an elite offensive line. Certainly not the kind of offensive line that's going to give Georgia's front six kind of issues that some have in the past. Now, here's a guy I really do like. I know I talk bad about their offensive line. Their offensive line is just not good, guys. And if you've watched Clemson play, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about there. But I do like running back Phil Maffa. So they lose Will Shipley. They kind of had a 1-2 punch with Will Shipley and Phil Maffa. Phil Maffa, I watched this guy play a lot in high school. He's a Grayson kid. I'm from Gwinnett County. So I've seen this guy play a couple times in person. Seen him play a lot. Liked him in high school. He's become a really, really good college football player. He's 6'1", 230, so he's a bigger back. And really last year, he opened the season kind of as the Robin to Will Shipley's Batman. But as the season wore on, and Shipley dealt with a couple injuries himself, I mean, Phil Maffa donned that cape himself. He kind of became Batman for a little while there. I mean, there was the last 5 games of the regular season, he had 16 or more carries in each of those 5 games. Against Notre Dame, he had 36 carries in that game for 186 yards. They just fed him the ball over and over and over in that game. Beat Notre Dame in that game, by the way, which was one of the big wins they had last year. And last year, Moffa had just a hair under 1,000 yards, 965 yards last year, 5.39 yards per carry. He's not a burner. Like, he's not explosive back. I'm not saying he can't hit some big runs, but big runs for Moffa are like 20 to 30 yards maybe, because he's going to get caught. Like, somebody's going to catch a guy. He's not a home run threat. Like, I'm talking like he's going to take one 65, 70 yards. He's not that kind of guy, but he's still really effective because he might not be the fastest back, but he's got really good feet paired with really good vision. He's got that short area quickness. He can make you miss in the hole. He runs. He's a bigger guy, and he runs with good power. He runs behind his pads. Sometimes the bigger backs don't run that hard. He does. He actually runs behind his pads. So he's a really good running back, but behind him, I wonder, like, who's that other guy? It looks like it's going to be Jay Haynes, but there's no Will Shipley here. So they had that 1-2 punch. I'm sure they're going to try to feed Moffa. I mean, I imagine they will try to feed Phil Moffa in that Week 1 matchup besides Mercedes-Benz Stadium, but, I mean, if they can even keep this game close, gets to a fourth quarter game, how much is this guy going to still have in the tank when they've been feeding the ball over and over again without somebody to really spell him to be as effective as he is? And, like, again, like, Will Shipley was good for them. I question his vision. Like, Shipley ran 100 miles an hour, man. That guy was just tough as nails. But, like, sometimes he just put his head down and like run into piles. And, like, dude, like, no, like, the hole's here, go there. Like, his vision was questionable. Phil Moffa has much better vision. But, like, who's the other guy? Who's the other guy right now? And maybe somebody will emerge. But right now, I think that's a big question going this game for this Clemson rush attack. Schematically, their run game is very, very gap scheme heavy under Garrett Riley. They love the GT counter, the guard tackle counter. They love that. They'll throw in some zone stuff here and there, maybe some duo here and there. But they are heavy, heavy, heavy gap scheme. So what does that mean for Georgia? Well, we love to run our mint front. Our mint front's been our base front for a while. Now, I don't know how much mint front we're going to run against Clemson. These gap heavy or gap scheme heavy teams. What the gap scheme does, if you run a mint front, if you guys know what I'm talking about, mint front, you got a nose tackle, zero tech nose, you got 2 4 eyes, right? So we're inside shoulder of the tackle there. So you're basically in the B gaps. That's great because you want to clog the middle. You want to clog the A gaps and the B gaps. But also what it does is it gives the offensive lineman angles with pin and pull stuff, which is what a GT counter is and what Clemson really likes to run under Garrett Riley. So I wonder if we'll see some more even front stuff, some more under front kind of thing. But they're very, very gap scheme heavy. They'll pull a lot of guys, get them into your face, and you got to be prepared for that. They also will work some quarterback run game into the mix. Again, Cade Klubnik, for all his deficiencies as a passer, is a really good athlete, and they will try to keep you honest with the quarterback run game. So yeah, that's the Clemson offense. That's the Clemson offense, a far cry from their glory years. And I believe, again, the biggest reason why Clemson as a program has fallen off from the ranks of the elite college football teams out there in the landscape of college football. Now, will that change this year? Because, like, what we're talking about right now is what we've seen the last 3 years. We're trying to project forward to 2024, so we don't have all the answers right now. All we can go off is what we've seen in the past. So will they be better? Will this offense get closer to what it was from 2015 to 2020 this year? I'm certainly skeptical. Now, the optimistic view, if you're a Clemson fan, you want to be optimistic. I mean, hope springs eternal in the offseason, right? So I don't blame you. An optimistic Clemson fan would say, okay, well, it's year 2 of Garrett Riley, right? Year 2 of Cade Klubnik as a starter. The offensive line is healthy. The receivers are finally healthy. We do return 79% of offensive production, which is top 20 in the country, according to Bill Connolly's returning production ratings. So all that says, yeah, Clemson should be better on offense. And I do think they will be better on offense. I do. I'm not saying they won't be. But there's a big gap between what Clemson was last year and what they were when this team was contending for national titles. And that's far too big of a gap to bridge in 1 year, in my estimation, with roughly the same personnel. Yes, some guys are coming back from injury, but you still have Cade Klubnik quarterback. I still got to see to believe it from him, all right? I still need to see one of your receivers emerge as a legitimate, bona fide star at receiver. I need to see your offensive line be able to block an elite front six. Those are questions I still have. So Clemson fans, if you're being optimistic, yes, you want to lean on continuity and say, well, continuity says we'll be better this year. Yeah, probably a little bit. But there's still a massive talent gap there between what Clemson has on offense and what Georgia has on defense. That's just reality, guys. I think the more realistic view is that, yes, Clemson should probably be better this year, but still not near where they were during that 6-year run of making college football playoff appearances, and not really good enough to truly threaten the defense the caliber of Georgia. If you think about it, I mean, okay, here's another number for you guys, all right? So Georgia defense, I know wasn't as good last year, still a top 10, top 15 caliber defense, but Clemson, over the last 2 years, has played 6 games against top 30 defenses, okay? In those 6 games against top 30 defenses, Clemson's offense averaged 347 yards per game. Well, guys, even if you want to say Georgia's defense in 2024 won't be what it was in 21 or 22, I'd probably agree. I'd say Georgia's going to be better on defense than we were in 2023. But even if you want to say we're not going to be as good as we were in 21 and 22, Georgia's still a top 15 caliber defense in the country, right? Clemson's averaged under 350 yards a game the last 2 years against teams that were in the top 30, okay? Top 30. Do we really think this Clemson offense has what it takes to challenge the Georgia defense enough to legitimately win this football game, absent Georgia just self-destructing and turning the football over and blowing this game like they did against Alabama? That's possible, right? It's possible. Sure, maybe. They can improve enough to make a run and win this game. Maybe. They still have some really talented players at spots, especially defensively, which we'll get to in a minute. It's possible. But I would also say it's certainly not likely. It's not the most likely outcome. I'll also throw this out there too. We're talking about the Clemson offense. Georgia has experience facing Garrett Riley, okay? Not a lot, but we have faced Garrett Riley back when he was at TCU in that 2022 National Championship game. And how did that turn out for TCU? Oh yeah, that's right. The biggest blowout in the history of college football bowl games. And I would argue, now Clemson fans would disagree with me on this, I'm sure, but I would argue that TCU offense in 2022 had better players and was just overall better than what Clemson will be this year. That's what I would argue. So if the Georgia defense, I know it was a 2022 Georgia defense, had that kind of success against a Garrett Riley offense that I arguably think certainly more explosive players and was more explosive TCU offense than what Clemson will have in 2024, why would we think this Clemson offense is going to be able to have the type of success against the Georgia defense that it will take for them to win this football game? All right, guys, so that's the Clemson offense. Not exactly intimidating. The Clemson defense, however, well, that is a very different story, okay? That is still very much a force to be reckoned with. So I know Clemson fans, you're probably mad at me if you're watching this episode, listening in. You're mad at me about talking about the Clemson offense. I think if you're being real with yourself, you got to agree with a lot of what I had to say there. But here's where I'm going to make up for it. I'm going to tell you how good your defense is because they are. I believe it, man. And here's some numbers to back this up. The Clemson defense has finished inside the top 15 nationally in total defense every year since 2014, with the sole exception of 2022. And in 2022, they were 28th nationally with 334 yards allowed per game. They also have not given up more than 21 points per game since 2014. That is remarkable consistency. And not just like consistency, that's remarkably consistent elite play from the Clemson defense. And to be honest with you guys, that is what has kept this Clemson program afloat over the last 3 years, while their offense has straight up disintegrated into ash. It's the defense. The defense has kept this program alive. Now, they haven't had as much success as Clemson fans would like. Only won 8 regular season games last year. But if it wasn't for the defense, I mean, they might have won 6 or 7 games last year. They wouldn't have won the ACC title in 2022 if it wasn't for that defense. As bad as I wouldn't say it's gotten bad for Clemson, but as much as they've fallen from where they were from 2015 to 2020, they would have fallen further and harder if it wasn't for this defense. And last year, this Clemson defense was statistically very similar to the Georgia defense. So Clemson gave up 288 yards per game last year. Georgia gave up 289. Clemson gave up an average of 4.7 yards per play. Georgia, 4.77 yards per play. Georgia was better with the scoring defense. Georgia allowed 15.6 points per game. Clemson allowed 21.1 points per game. Clemson was number 4 in FEI, so they were more efficient than Georgia. Georgia finished 11th in FEI. So very similar statistical profile to the Georgia defense from last year. And I do fully expect this Clemson defense to be elite once again in 2024. But saying that, I mean, they do lose some very important players off that unit from last year. In fact, they only returned 49% of their defensive production from last year, which is 103rd nationally. So offensively, they return a lot of talent from a unit that was not good. Defensively, they do not return much talent from a defense that was very, very good. So let's look at some of the players they did lose. Jeremiah Trotter, just a stalwart, great player for them in the middle of that defense at linebacker. Nate Wiggins in the first round, a cornerback, Tyler Davis, Riccaroro, their two best defensive linemen. Tyler Davis was awesome for them, and Roro was great too. Falcons fans, you know what I'm talking about there. Xavier Thomas was never quite the dynamic pass rusher they wanted him to be. Never really kind of lived up to the 5-star stats coming out of high school, but was still very good for them, a very experienced player. All those guys are gone. So is Andrew Makuba, who was their starting safety last year. Those guys are gone. That's some serious talent to have to replace in 1 year. But, I mean, it's not all bad for Clemson. They still do return a lot of really nice pieces to this defense, even though they do lose quite a bit. They run a base 4-3. They've done that for years and years and years. They run almost exclusively with even fronts. From a personnel standpoint, I think that the headliner is Barrett Carter. All right, inside linebacker Barrett Carter. If you're from the state of Georgia like I am, I'm a Gwinnett County kid back in the day. North Gwinnett High School. I wanted Barrett Carter back in the day. I wanted him to come to Georgia. I'm not going to lie. I wanted Barrett Carter. I really liked him coming out of high school. Watched him play quite a bit. He goes to Clemson. And he's one of those guys, like Clemson will get a 5-star guy here or there. Going back to what I was saying about their recruiting. Like they don't recruit in the top 3 to 5 level consistently, but they recruit at the top 10 level. But they'll still get a 5-star guy here and there. And Barrett Carter is one of those guys. And he's a very experienced player now. I thought he'd probably go pro. Did not get the draft grade he wanted, so he decided to come back. He's got 26 starts over the last 3 years. So a very experienced player. Now, here's the thing with Barrett Carter as a player. He plays inside linebacker, kind of in a tweener at times throughout his career. He struggles in the box. He's not a true downhill linebacker. When guys get in his face, when blockers get up on him, he has a really hard time disengaging and fighting through those blocks. That's not his strong suit. He's much more effective in space. Like he excels in space. And they've used him at times, spread almost like in the nickel back, like covering guys out there, being a kind of a force defender. And that's really where he excels, running side on the sideline, using his athleticism, because that's what he is. He's an incredible athlete, a very gifted athlete. He's gotten a little bit bigger. He's about 230, 6'1", about 230. So it's not like he's like small, but he's still not a truly effective box linebacker. And they're going to try, and they'll spread him out to do some different things, and they'll blitz him a lot. They blitz their linebackers like crazy. But Barrett Carter is a really good player. If they use him effectively, he has the potential to be a dynamic player, and he has been at times for this Clemson defense. Now, offensively though, if you're an opposing offense, you got to find him, you got to target him and make him a downhill defender in the box. If you make him do that, he struggles. So we'll see. I imagine Georgia will come a lot of 12 personnel, some heavy sets, try to keep him in the box and try to make him defend the run right in his face, because I'm not saying he can't do it. He's just not great at it. That's just not that's not his strong suit. But he's really, really good. He's back this year. And Wade Woodaz is the guy. So you lose Jeremiah Trotter. I really like Wade Woodaz. He came on strong late last year. He got 5 starts, ended up with 4 sacks, which was 3rd on the team. Now, he'll play in the middle some, but they'll rush him off the edges. He plays like Sam linebacker for them, and he's a really good pass rushing linebacker. Again, they blitz their linebackers a lot. They'll blitz all of them. They'll blitz them in different times, different angles, different personnel. Will almost certainly be the strength of this defense. Again, it kind of always has been, man. Like it always seems to be. They kind of just keep rolling guys in and out on that defensive line. Now, they do lose their top 2 guys in Tyler Davis and Riccaroro. I'm butchering his name. I always butcher that guy's name. That's like the one I can get Uyunglele. Like I got that name easy, man. Like from day one. But Ororo, it's just like weird, man. That doesn't roll off the tongue. But I really like Peter Woods. Peter Woods, I think, is the dude. He's the dude. And he's got some positional versatility. He can play inside, like a 3-tech, can play a little bit on the outside, rushing the passer at times. But I think he might be the next guy for them at defensive tackle. TJ Parker's a really good pass rusher off the edge, a good run defender as well. He actually was tied for the lead in sacks last year with Jeremiah Trotter at 5.5. So he'll be out there again. They have a really good young nucleus on the defensive line who've all gotten some playing time. Here's another guy that I'm intrigued by. He didn't play a ton last year, but I thought DeMonte Capehart, when he got opportunities last year, I thought he really flashed for them. Like he could be physically dominant. He's a big dude, 6'5", 320, kind of can play that nose, can play a little bit 3-tech, he's a good athlete. Again, didn't play a ton for them because you got Tyler Davis and Riccaroro, you got Peter Woods coming in, but Capehart's a good player. He's a very capable player, and I'm intrigued to see how much they use him this season. But look, man, linebackers, defensive line, this front 6, as it has been for years and years and years, it's going to be an elite front 6. I have very little question about that. The back end, however, I think that's a little bit of a different story. I do have some questions about the back end. They're losing a lot of talent in the back end. So at corner, their top 2 guys are going. We talked about Nate Wiggins. He went to the NFL, first-round draft guy. Sheridan Jones off the NFL. They do have some talent. It's not like they're just sitting there with no talented options. They do have some talented options. So Avion Terrell, yes, brother of A.J. Terrell, he started the last 5 games of last year, and he is a guy that I think is going to be a really good player for them. I fully expect him to start at one of the cornerback spots. Yes, right now the Clemson coaching staff will say, hey, it's a battle. We don't know who's going to start. I expect Avion Terrell to be one of those guys. The sample size I saw from him last year tells me he's going to be a really good football player for them. His recruiting profile says the same thing. Jade Lucas also started 4 games for them last year, and I liked what I saw from him as a former 5-star player. He wasn't entirely consistent, but you could see the talent, and I imagine with another year under his belt, if he is going to be a starter, that guy will be a better player for them. So I think they have some good talented options. They just don't have much experience at cornerback right now, no surefire corners that are going to be like studs for them like they had last year with Nate Wiggins. I think Shelton Lewis would be my projection to win the battle at the nickel spot. So that they have some guys that I think can be really good at corner. But again, they just lack the experience. They don't have the proven guys right now. Guys that could grow into that and be those dudes. But we can't sit here and say like definitively, yes, they are solidified at cornerback. We'll see. We'll see there. At safety, I mentioned lose Andrew McCoo, but he did not graduate. He transferred out. One of the guys that transferred out. I mean, we all know it's well documented. Clemson did not bring in any transfers. And I do think that's a problem because Clemson, as I laid out earlier, there are some holes in this roster. The easy answer to fix that is to go to the portal and get proven commodities and bring them in and plug those holes. Clemson has seemed unwilling to do that. I don't think it's unable. It's just they're unwilling to do that. And that's a gamble that we're going to see how it pays off with Dabo Swinney. It's a culture thing, I think, more than anything with him, but we'll see how that pays off. But they lose Andrew McCoo, but they do return R.J. Mickens, who has 15 stars over the last 2 years. Mickens is good. I don't think he's an elite guy. He's not a top-level NFL guy, but he's a good, experienced player for them in their back end. That's important at safety because that is your last line of defense. You do not want to have bust back there, and he's got plenty of experience. Right now, I guess I would project that Kylan Griffin, at least what it looks like right now, will be the other starter at safety, but he has basically no playing time. So I don't really have much of an evaluation on him. So we'll see how that looks out, how that turns out. But guys, again, that secondary, I think there's questions there. I have very little questions about their front six. I think they're going to be really good in the front six. Secondary, if there's a vulnerability in this Clemson defense, I think it's the secondary. Now, is their front six so good that they just speed up the passing game of the opposing offense and derail that and make it difficult for them to even try to attack the secondary? That might be the case. That could be the secondary's best friend. That very well might be the case. But if Carson Beck has time to throw, I do believe this is a secondary that we have a chance to have a lot of success against. I really do believe that. Now, I imagine the game plan for Clemson will be to light Carson Beck up. Because if you look at it last year, I mean, Carson, as good as he was, if you're looking for vulnerabilities, some deficiencies in Carson's game, when the very few times he did get pressured, I mean, the Alabama game, he's not great. He's not as good when things break down. He's not a quarterback that's going to create, right? So if you can get after him, if you can pressure him, and truly get after him, force him off his spot, he can handle pressure in his face. But if you force him off his spot, he's not the kind of athlete that's he's not Patrick Mahomes going to create on the move, right? That's not what he does. So that's going to be, I imagine, be their game plan. Blitz the hell out of him, get him off his spot. Now, the problem for the Clemson defense, the problem with that game plan is they're facing an offensive line that was top 10 last year in sacks allowed and returns 4 starters from that unit, okay? I would argue, I mean, at the very least, one of the best offensive lines in the country this year. So I'm pretty sure that'd be the Clemson game plan. If I was Clemson, looking at how they traditionally operate their defense and where Carson Beck might struggle, I think you got to try to light him up, but that's easier said than done against this Georgia offensive line. Also, Carson Beck is elite as a processor, diagnosing coverages, diagnosing pressure packages, pre-snap, post-snap, getting the ball out of his hands. Whatever you do to this man, he has an answer for it, right? So if you can force him off his spot, you got a chance. But again, easier said than done with our offensive line and Beck's ability to process and get the ball out of his hands and just know where to go with the football really in all situations. So to summarize all this, to put a nice little bow on this initial Scout the Enemy series of the 2024 offseason, Clemson's going to be good, guys. They're going to be good in 2024. I'm not suggesting otherwise. I have a lot of respect for this program. They will be good. However, I do not think Clemson will be great. This is not going to be a throwback 2015 to 2020 Clemson. This is not the year that they go back to being that kind of team because I still don't think they have the personnel. I still don't think they have the quarterback. Now, I mean, because if you look about it, guys, over the last 2 seasons, if you look at like statistical profiles and going back to yardage margin, Clemson over the past couple of years has a statistical profile far more akin to Ole Miss and Tennessee and go back like 2022 Oregon. Their statistical profile is far more like those teams than Ohio State and Michigan and Texas in recent years. So let me ask you this. What has Georgia done to Ole Miss and Tennessee and Oregon back in 2022? Yeah, blown them out, killed them, murdered them, whatever you want to say, right? Destroyed them, wiped them out. Georgia beat the crap out of all of those teams. I'm not sitting here saying that's necessarily what will happen in this matchup against Clemson, because again, I do have a lot of respect for this program. I think they're very well coached. They do have a lot of good talent in certain spots. They're really good defensively. As good as they are defensively, I don't know if Georgia's going to be able to blow them out and put that many points up on the board. And I do think there is reason to believe that Clemson's offense will be improved. I do think this program will be out to prove something. I don't know how much that matters, but they'll be out to prove something. And it's week 1. Week 1 is like you don't have as much tape to operate. The tape you have to operate off of is what happened last year. You don't know what they've worked on, the wrinkles they've added in the offseason. So you're kind of working on the fly. So that makes it a little bit more difficult. But what I can tell you is that recent history tells us a comfortable Georgia win in this game is the most likely outcome when you look at this matchup in totality. But all right, guys, that is it. That is the first edition of our 2024 Scouting the Mini Series. There's a lot more where that came from. We're just getting started here. This is the first one. We'll go through each of the Power 5 games. And we're not done talking Georgia Clemson. This is just our initial foray into Georgia Clemson. We'll have a lot more coverage of Georgia Clemson leading up to kickoff of week 1 in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But I love this, man. I've been waiting to do this for a long time. There's nothing I love more than talking hardcore college football, Georgia football. So again, if you are just finding us for the first time, if you like this episode, make sure that you follow the podcast on social media at Glory UGA. Make sure you subscribe, like, comment. Make sure you are checking out the Glory UGA podcast wherever you get your podcast for more great coverage like this. We're not going to put all the Scouting the Mini episodes, the full episodes at least, on YouTube. So this was kind of a special edition. I want to give you guys a taste of what we have to offer. So check that out, guys. Greatly appreciate you. I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs!
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.